Alright, so for this, I just got this model from a friend of mine, and the thing is that's going on with this was she had a couple of problems with her UVs that she was asking me about, and her UVs right here are not lining up. Well, I'm going to go over a couple of things. This is definitely a one-off video, just kind of getting back in the flow of everything, but for this, how would I approach kind of UVing this out in terms of doing it through Maya, and also a recommendation I had sent her for another program she could go through, which I had another video on, which was roadkill, to just kind of speed up her workflow a little bit more. First thing I'm going to do is, so I'm not so far off the grid, because she was working on this within her scene area here, is I'm just going to center this back in the center, in the middle of the scene. But to keep the original one, I'm going to duplicate this now. Control D to get that duplicated, and she had some values here from her previous history, so if I zero that out, it's going to send it in the back there. Well, it's not where I want it to be, so I need it to go into the center. So I'm going to get an angle here where I can see this, and I'm just going to hold down X, and with this the blue square here, I'm just going to move within the X and Y coordinates, and now I'm in the center, but I want to get this thing to be at the bottom, because if I go to the side perspective or orthographic view, I'm going to deselect that so I can see everything in my scene. I'm just going to hit F on my orthographic views to see where everything is. And as you can see here on the front view, that our object we want to work on is below this line here compared to the original. The original's pivot point was in the center, so the pivot point's going to find the center of whatever grid it was wanting to snap to, since I was moving it based on snapping on edges here by holding down X. So holding down X will again turn this on and off for snapping to the grid. So I'm going to bring this up pretty close to the edge of the ground here, and I'm just going to hit insert, hold down X, and I'm going to snap that back down to the middle. So I'm going to hit insert again to turn off that pivot point, and let's go back to our scene, and there's our object into the grid space on center point, and I'm going to freeze out these transforms to completely get rid of where this is. Now I have my own little shelf that I work on. This is by default, this is by polygons. In my own custom shelf, I have all my own little buttons that I like to work in, constantly use quite a bit. I have everything from like just standard outliners to polygons to animations. So if I wanted to add another button, one of the things I would do most of the time is, for instance, like we want to freeze our transforms out on this. So what I can do is I can add a new button by going into a shelf here. If I want to make my own, I can come down here and just do a new shelf, give it a name, and I'll just call this example. And now I have my own new shelf, completely empty for me, and I can use it however I see fit. However, if I go to a new workstation or somebody's computer that doesn't have the same setup as me, I'm going to have to rebuild all that. But you can save this out. I'm not going to go over that right now. But let's just get a new button shelf in here so we can have it. And what I'll do is I'll go into our edit here, and I can go to delete all by type. I know I want my history to be deleted, so if I come down to navigating it, I can hold down Control and Shift and come over and left click on this button, and it'll create a shortcut for me. So let's find another one that we want, and another one that we wanted was the freeze transforms, and we can find that within the modify and freeze transforms. So if I clicked on that, and you'll see that now we have two buttons, so I can freeze transforms, and my transforms are completely zeroed out. So this object is in the middle of the world. So if I move it anywhere within the world and zero this out again, it'll go right back down to the center of the world working space. Okay, so the next step is, now that we have this centered up, I wanted to check this to see what kind of UVs she was working on before. So pulling up the UVs, I'm going to go to my custom tab, and again, UV texture editor, which I can find by going to the polygons drop down menu, edit mesh, go over to the edit UVs, and we can find our UV editor. At the very bottom of that, and we can see the UVs that have already been done on this object. Now I can already tell where the problem is occurring in terms of these objects here. Now if I wanted to see, everything else looks fine except for right when it gets in this corner. To see what's going on there is I can right click over this object, and I can go into face selection, and if I hover over, I can see all the different faces it wants to pre-select for me, or what my selection is going to be, and I can see it highlighting up there within the UV editor. So I know that this couple of sections up here have actually been broken up over here in this top portion. Now I can't select those if you saw my marquee there. It's because I'm in a UV editor compared to being in the actual editor in 3D Space. So if I wanted to select these shapes in here, I could right click, and just like before, when we right click out here, it gives us the types of selections to use on 3D objects. We were right clicking our UV space, now we have objects in which we're moving within the object's UVs. So I'm going to go into shell mode. If I marquee select over these, I'm going to hold shift and marquee select these as well, I can see where all these different pieces are broken up. Now, looking at how this was working, I could tell that this was actually being done symmetrically. So the good thing is because these UVs are going to be redone, we can actually delete half this object, fix up the symmetry, and we can mirror it over again and then redo our UVs. Now she gave me permission to do that, so I have no hard feelings for deleting her work. So to get this symmetrical, I'm going to go to the top view and take a look at this. So orthographic, go to top, and I can see it was pretty close to symmetrical, so I'm going to go to face selection mode, and I'm just going to delete these, marquee select and delete these faces. Now I know it's not symmetrical because if you see here, let's turn off UV since we're not working on that right now. If you see here that our vertices are not perfectly centered along with this 0 mark in the middle of the world, since we're looking at the grid from the orthographic view up. It's better to do this not within perspective, because perspective you can have times where you might be thrown off a little bit, but orthographic view, you're seeing everything in like a perfect directional front, back, left, and right. Whereas in perspective view, the view can be a little bit distorted in terms of to make it look more natural to the human eye instead of being on a blueprint type look. So for this, I'm going to go back into a normal view. To do that, what I was doing was I was hitting Control and Spacebar, and I was just maximizing it to like a pro viewport or whatever. So I'm going to go to Vertex selection here. Again, I'm just holding over right click to bring up a marquee, and I'm just going to come over to your vertex here, and I'm just going to marquee select all these vertices here. And what I'm going to do is I can try to go through each one of these and try to snap them by holding on X and just snapping each one of these. But here's the problem. If I were to have these all marquees selected and say I wanted these to be aligned, sometimes by default when you come over to your tools tab over here and down below the move section, a little bit further down but halfway in, we'll find a move snap settings. Sometimes your retain component spacing may be checked on or off. If it's on, what's going to happen is as we try to move these objects, if we try, let's say we wanted to snap these to be perfectly aligned down here, if we're holding down X, what's going to happen is it's still going to retain that shape on the edge of that line. So what I want to do is I want all these vertices to snap together in one move. So what I can do is I can turn off that retain component spacing, hold down the X key, and then if I snap towards the middle, our object's vertices will line up with each other. So it's a nice little quick way to do that. It took me a little while to find out that little quick tool. So now we have our object symmetrical at this point. Let's go ahead and mirror it over. There's a couple of ways of doing this. You can actually go through mesh and you can do mirror geometry, and we can do it by the negative Y. Since I'm working in a Z up type of workspace within my our negative Y, we can actually merge the original and merge these verts. So when it's completely moved over, now our object is actually going to be welded together. So if we select our edges here and move it around, we'll see that our object is actually together. Now here's a problem that happened when I did this with this object. As you can see here, like looking at these UVs, I'm going to turn off these UVs right now. I'm just going to go back to a regular Lambert color. I'm just going to right click, I'm just going to assign a new material. I'm just going to put a Lambert on there so I can actually see this object. You can see what's going on here is like half of this is dark and half of this is actually light. Like this is how I want this side. I want this side to look like this. So what is going on? Well, normally I would think that possibly might be within the face normals. But if I were to select this object, go to shift and come down to the harden soften edge, And I'm sorry, if we go to the normals, because we need to flip these, we can right click, we can go to face mode, select everything, and shift right click face normals, and we can form these normals. Nothing happened. Well, the reason for that being is because it's not in the edge normals or face normals, it's actually within the vertex normals. So here's a process that'll happen to do that. Now it's the same thing we just did. So within vertex, we can select everything on our object again with all the vertices, and again holding down shift, vertex normals, set normals to face. And what that'll do is it'll find the faces it's going to favor most, and it's actually going to form all of those vertexes to be the same direction as the other ones. Now there's a problem that happened doing that. Everything got faceted. Everything became a hard edge in terms of all the edges. And I wanted to keep that silhouette, but I didn't want to like make everything hard edge. I want some stuff to be soft, some stuff to be hard, to give it a better profile. So I'm going to undo a couple of things back to when we mirrored this, and I'm going to do a duplicate special. And hopefully what that'll do is that'll actually retain all of our our edges and vertex data on this piece over to our other one. So again, you can find that up in the excuse me. You can find that within the edits and duplicate special. And with that box selected, we can choose the direction we want to mirror this in. So we have it our -y like before, and we only want one copy. And you can do a copy or an instance, but for this we're going to be welding this together. So if I do apply, you can see it actually went the other way there. So let me go ahead and change a couple of values here. So let's do 1. Let's try -1 in Z. See if that gets it over. Okay, cool. So that came over that time. So it doesn't look like we had any normal problems, but this is backwards. Well, we can select both these pieces of geometry here, and we can actually combine these. So if we go to edit, I'm sorry about that, go to mesh and combine. This will actually bring your pieces together, but we still have to get our edges to weld together because right now it's two separate pieces. Well, the good thing is our edges have actually been preserved, and same with our normals. So again, I'll assign a new material so I can get rid of that checker box, and we can see our normals got preserved from what we had before, but we got to get our edges to be welded. One of the things I tend to do is I tend to do a vertex. I'll select all. For this example I'm doing this, but sometimes it's also best just to only select the verts that you want to affect. And what I'll do is I'll shift right click, come down to merge vertices, and there's actually a merge vertices option here. Within those options, I tend to go within a 0.01. It's a very minuscule amount of space it's going to move. It's not going to adjust the topology at all. As far as this value I've been using for a while does. Sometimes if you go to a higher value though, like if I jump up to about, I don't know, 2, that actually is going to merge those together. Now the good thing is, because we symmetried our object over, our verts should be within, sitting like right on top of each other. So now if we do an apply, and I select those edges again at the top here, or anything in the front, see that our edges have actually welded together, and we've actually retained our data for our vertex normals and our face normals. Okay, so now let's get to the good part. We need to get this thing UV'd out again. So if I check the UVs, everything looks a little bit more purple in this UV editor. Again, to get to the editor for a UV texture editor, just go to edit UVs and down to UV texture editor to bring this up. And I have my overlap on, so we're seeing that like we have overlapping faces going on in this object. If I were to select one of the shells and move it, the normal color would actually be blue. This is actually backwards, so we're going to fix this in just a moment here. So what I want to do is I want to get this thing into 3 pieces. I know that this is like a lip of an attachment. I'll keep the shell separate from the bottom because we have this hard edge that's flowing right in the middle, so that'll actually hide a lot of that nasty detail if we have any bakes that happen on this thing. So let's take our first part here, And I'm going to go to my side view and hit F to bring that up. And what I'm going to do is I'll do a face select. Select all the faces down to this line right about here. So that edge is where I'm going to have it break. And then from there, I'm actually going to do a UVs based on camera. And I'm going to do the camera straight down in orthographic view. To do that, we can do create UVs. We can do a create UVs based on camera. And there's actually more options you can specify here, but I tend to find that it does it pretty well based on whatever camera angle you're at. So if I'm at like the side here and I do the option, this is the option right here, UVs based on camera, it'll actually make UVs based on the angle in which you're looking. Very nifty little tool. So if I go straight up and down, that'll give me a good starting point for this object to begin UVing it out. Now it's almost done. The only thing is we got some overlap going on, and some of these UVs, if we check out the stretching, or not, that's texture space, my bad. And some of this would be stretching in ways. Again, if I were to bring up the checker pattern, it'd be easier to see this. So as you can see here, some of these UVs are pretty flat, but as we get down, these UVs begin to stretch and like really pull over themselves, and it's not good. It can make your bakes look really weird, and then trying to adjust things in the future will just become a real pain. So for this, I'm going to go to shell mode, and what I'm going to do is I'll just go up to the polygons tool up in the UV texture editor, and I'll just do an unfold. From the unfold, I didn't really change any of the options really, but you can change like how much is this unfold going to affect in terms of the object being deformed. And if you notice before, let me undo that really quick. So this was our UVs stretched. Once we unfolded it, all our UVs became pretty even at this point. So we're after, okay, so our top piece is done. So I'm going to move this off to the side. Now we got this real mess here. I know I need to separate this, so I need to find the shell pieces for this. So it looks like I got two. Move over to the side, and I have one more face, is just this. But I can tell what's going on is if I try to move these, they're going to bring these extra edges with them along. So to break that off, I have the faces selected. I can go to right click and I can create a UV shell, and that'll allow me to move it over to the side. So again, I'm going to select those pieces, and probably do is I'll just do it based on camera again. So I'll go straight up and down and do UVs by camera, and all these edges should now be selected, so they should be one shell. Yeah, I'm not getting any other shells, just one shell at this point, so it welded all that together for us. It's taken up a lot of texture space. We're going to change that in a second here. So again, we'll just do a unfold to relax it down, and I'm just going to scale it way down because this is not a very important little part. I think she even told me she's going to delete it. Okay, so now we have one last piece, and there's our main structure of this cryopod she's working on. So again, just like we did with the top piece, I'm going to find an angle that I'm favoring. Side's pretty good. Let's take a look at the back. Okay, the back is probably doing really well for this shape. So again, what I'll do is I'll select all of these shell pieces here, and I'll just do it based on camera, and from there, unfold. That did pretty well. However, I'm getting a little bit of warping going on. It could be warping or it could be just the angle, but I really do think it's the warping that's going on. So what I can do is I can try a few different things. I could try an optimize, which evens out everything. It's not what I want. Or I can also do an automatic unwrap, which I believe is under edit UVs, create UVs, and automatic mapping, and that'll break all that up. It's not really a good thing that we want there. So let's go to unfold, and we're going to try seeing if we can manipulate a few things here. So I'm going to bring this down a bit more. Alright, I'm not getting any changes on this, but we're off to a good start on this. We at least have some information going on. Now, one thing I probably could do is I could probably use roadkill to try to break this up. But to give you a quick example, that's a couple ways you can unwrap this within Maya. I tend not to unwrap a lot of my stuff in Maya. I use Vertices as my main program to do it. It's very fast. It costs me some money, but I've loved the program for the years I've used it. So I'm going to use this object. I'm going to unwrap it in a roadkill. So we have this object pretty much done. I can actually just take this object. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees over. I'll just leave it alone for now. I'll deal with it as we get in there. I'm going to export this selection. I'm just going to throw it on my desktop, and I'm just going to call it an OBJ. I don't need the material, so I'll export as an OBJ. And let's open up roadkill. And this is the glory of roadkill. It's pretty small, and it's a very small program at that. So I'm going to load up my OBJ I just got to exporting out. And if you're not able to export out OBJs within Maya, sometimes Maya has this little thing where it likes to disable some features you might not be able to export. So if you're looking at your export selection and you cannot find this OBJ export, which should always usually be at the bottom since it's usually added or so, if you can never find it, check to make sure that in your plugins within Window, Settings and Preferences and Plugin Manager, this goes in alphabetical order. So if we come down to the O section, OBJ export.mml, just make sure it's loaded in auto load, and that'll make sure that OBJ export does show up on that menu. You may have to restart Maya for it to show up. It all depends. Alright, let's jump back into roadkill and let's get this UV'd out. Well, the cool thing is it actually retained our UV work that we did. What I could do is I can actually see about splitting this little piece right here. Let me see what roadkill gives me. So if I go to edge selection mode, and one of the things I'm going to turn off on switches is don't select back faces because I don't like that. It just selects the other sides when you're trying to select the front, and it can be very frustrating to work with. If I just select one edge and I do cut, that actually dang, that actually gave us everything I wanted. So if I can weld that back together, I'm pretty much done. That's it. I mean, I've loved roadkill. It's a very fast program in terms of UVing, but it just gave us our UVs that we were looking for, and it actually evened out the surface of this. Again, we can come to our textures and we can do show stretch. We can see where there's some places that have some pinching going on, but overall this object is not stretching that bad. It's not a complex piece, so that's one of the nice things about it. Now there are additional videos out there about roadkill. I have one out there as well, but if I need to make another one, I can. It'll be totally fine. So I'm going to save this out. I'm just going to save it over our little object we had before. Open it back up in Maya. So I'm going to move this over since I know this is the one I was working on. File, import, and let me navigate to my little piece. I got a lot of objects on my desktop I got to clean up. So not the box, but the cryopod piece. There's our cryopod we were working on, and the UVs were retained for our object. So now if I apply that material to it for our checkerboard, we can now see that our checkers are pretty big on this because our object has kind of changed size when it was in roadkill. So I'm going to up the checkerboard on this thing. So I'm going to go into the Lambert 4 that I'm working on, and I'm going to go with the color. Since I gave it a texture color, I'm just going to up the amount of checkers I can see on this. So place 2D texture. Basically you're messing with the UV texture space of this material. You're not affecting the object. And I'm just going to kick that up to about 20. Okay, so as you can see, our object is actually sharing the space really well with the top and the bottom piece of this object. Unlike this one, I think it is taking up more space down here than it is at the top. So it's not too bad of a start for our object there. So if there's anything else that you guys want to know, just let me know. And I know it's a one-off video, but hopefully I'll be getting back to the third-person shooter tutorial pretty soon. So thanks a lot.